Basil II, the slayer of Bulgars. The price of Trajan's gate. One defeat, one emperor. 28 years of revenge. There are moments in history when everything changes. Not with a grand declaration or a treaty signed in marble halls, but in the cold silence of a mountain pass, where blood freezes before it touches the ground. These are the moments that define not just individuals, but entire civilizations. The moments when the comfortable assumptions of power meet the brutal reality of defeat. When emperors learn that divine right means nothing to an arrow in flight, and that purple robes offer no protection against cold steel. The year is 986 AD. The place, a desolate corridor of rock and ice known as Trajan's Gate, named for the Roman emperor who had once marched his legions through these same mountains nearly 9 centuries earlier. It is a place where the wind howls through narrow defiles, where pine forests cling precariously to sheer cliffs, and where the ground is littered with the bones of previous travelers who made the mistake of underestimating the Balkans in winter. And here, in this forsaken landscape, the fate of empires will be written in the bodies of the dead. To understand what happened at Trajan's Gate, we must first understand what Byzantium had become by the late 10th century. For 1,000 years, the Eastern Roman Empire, what we call Byzantium, has endured. It has outlasted the fall of Rome itself, that catastrophic collapse in 476 AD, when the last Western emperor was deposed by a Germanic warlord. While the West descended into centuries of fragmentation and darkness, Constantinople remained a beacon of civilization, a city of 500,000 souls, where Greek philosophy still flourished, where Roman law still governed, where the traditions of classical antiquity were preserved like precious jewels in a troubled world. It has weathered invasions by Persians, who once came within sight of the city walls before being turned back. It has survived the explosive expansion of Islam, when Arab armies swept out of the desert and conquered everything from Spain to India, threatening to conquer all Christian civilizations in its path. It has endured attacks by Goths, Avars, Slavs, and countless other peoples whose names are now forgotten, but who once seemed poised to overwhelm the last remnant of Rome. Its capital, Constantinople, stands as the greatest city in Christendom, perhaps in the known world. The Hagia Sophia's dome catches the morning light, that enormous structure that seems to float impossibly above its foundations, a feat of engineering that would not be surpassed for centuries. The Golden Horn fills with ships from across the known world, Italian merchants bringing glass and wine, Arab traders offering spices and silk, Rus warriors seeking employment, Armenian craftsmen displaying their wares. The markets bustle with trade in languages so numerous that professional translators work every corner. The imperial palace complex sprawls across acres, its halls decorated with mosaics of solid gold, its libraries containing the wisdom of ages. But beneath the grandeur lie glimpses of decay. Sections of the ancient walls crumble, their maintenance deferred as funds are diverted to court intrigues and bribes. Beggars cluster in the shadows of churches, veterans of forgotten wars reduced to seeking alms from the same citizens they once protected. Soldiers lounge in barracks instead of drilling, their commanders more interested in cultivating political connections than military readiness. The great families, the Phocades, the Scleroi, the Ducai, maneuver endlessly for power, treating the empire not as a sacred trust, but as a prize to be seized. But empires are not eternal. They are organisms, living, breathing, and dying. They grow strong through adversity, plateau in prosperity, and begin their slow decline when success breeds complacency. And in 986, Byzantium is sick. Not with the dramatic illness that announces itself in blood and fire, but with the subtle rot that eats away at foundations while the structure above appears sound. The bureaucracy is bloated and corrupt. The military aristocracy is more interested in civil war than defending borders. The provinces groan under taxation, while the capital squanders wealth on ceremonials and spectacles. And at the center of this faltering empire sits a young man who has never known hardship. At its heart sits a young emperor, 28 years old, born in the purple, meaning born in the sacred imperial chambers reserved only for those destined to rule, a phrase that carries immense weight in Byzantine culture. To be porphyrogenitos means you are not just royalty, but royalty of the highest order, born into the very heart of imperial power. His name is Basil, son of Romanos II, grandson of Constantine VII, heir to a lineage that stretches back through centuries of emperors to Constantine the Great himself, the man who had made Christianity the religion of empire and moved the capital to this strategic position between Europe and Asia. He inherited a throne at the age of 18, though for the first years of his reign, true power rested with others. First his mother and her lover, then powerful generals who saw the young emperor as a puppet to be manipulated. Only recently has Basil begun to rule in his own right, and he is still finding his way, still learning what it means to command an empire that spans 3 continents. He has never been tested by war, never faced true disaster, never learned that crowns are not gifts, they are burdens, carried on shoulders strong enough not to break. He has been educated by the finest scholars, trained in rhetoric and theology, taught the intricate protocols of court life. But education and experience are not the same thing. Knowledge and wisdom are not equivalent. He knows intellectually that emperors must be strong. He has read histories of past rulers, studied their triumphs and failures. But knowing and understanding are different things entirely. That is about to change. In the mountains ahead, a trap is being set, and the emperor who rides into those mountains will not be the same man who rides out. Part 1. The disaster at Trajan's gate. Basil's army had been campaigning for weeks in the hostile Bulgarian wilderness. They came north to besiege Sofia, the stronghold of the Bulgarian kingdom, a realm that has defied Constantinople for generations, maintaining its independence through a combination of military skill, mountain geography, and the sheer stubbornness of a people who refuse to be conquered. The city sits in a fertile valley, surrounded by mountains, a natural fortress that has withstood siege after siege throughout the centuries. But the siege failed, not through any dramatic battle or clever Bulgarian stratagem, but through the simple mathematics of logistics and weather. Winter came early that year, sweeping down from the north with unexpected fury. Supplies ran low as the roads turned to mud, then ice, making resupply impossible. Disease spread through the ranks, the usual camp diseases that kill more soldiers than enemy action ever does: dysentery, fever, infections from minor wounds. Men who survived arrows and swords died shivering in their tents, calling for mothers they would never see again. Now in late autumn, with snow already falling and the army's provisions nearly exhausted, they are retreating. It is not a rout, not yet, but a calculated withdrawal, the army still organized and functioning, but eager to escape these hostile mountains before the full force of winter arrives. Inside the imperial tent, a structure of purple silk with gold embroidery, far too luxurious for a military campaign, Basil II stands over a map spread across a wooden table. The map is a work of art in itself, hand-drawn on vellum, showing the mountains and valleys of the Balkans in careful detail. He is younger than we might expect, clean-shaven in the Byzantine fashion, intense dark eyes that dart between the map and his generals, wearing the purple cloak of emperors but armor beneath it, a compromise between imperial dignity and military necessity. Around him stand his generals, older men, veterans of decades of campaigning, some with skeptical expressions barely concealed beneath the formal deference required in the presence of the emperor. They are men who remember Basil's father, who served his grandfather, who have seen emperors come and go while they remained, the permanent military establishment that provides continuity regardless of who wears the crown. General Bardas, a man in his 50s with a scarred face, the scar running from his left temple to his jaw, a souvenir from a battle in Asia Minor 2 decades earlier, and weary eyes that have seen too much death, speaks first. His voice is respectful but firm, the tone of a man who knows his business and is not afraid to speak truth to power. Your Majesty, the men are exhausted. We should winter here in this valley. Build fortifications. Resume the campaign in spring when the weather clears and we can properly resupply. Basil's response is sharp, impatient, the reaction of a young man who does not yet understand the wisdom of retreat. Winter here? Exposed? No. We return to Thrace, to civilization. The army needs rest, but in proper quarters, not frozen mud. The men need to see their families, receive proper medical care. We cannot maintain an army in these conditions. The mountain passes will be treacherous this late in the season. Majesty, Bardas presses, his concern evident. If the Bulgarians... Basil interrupts him, a habit he has developed that does not endear him to his subordinates. The Bulgarians are scattered, defeated. Samuel's forces broke weeks ago when we burned his supply depots. They won't dare attack an army of this size. 12,000 men, Bardas. Even if Samuel could gather every warrior in Bulgaria, he couldn't match our numbers. A younger officer, Constantine, a man Basil has promoted over the heads of more senior commanders, exchanges a glance with Bardas. Neither speaks, but their doubt is visible in the set of their shoulders, the quick look they share. They know something Basil doesn't, that numbers mean nothing in a mountain pass, that 10 men in the right position can hold off 1,000, that the emperor's confidence is dangerously misplaced. But they also know that contradicting the emperor too forcefully can end a career, or worse. Basil was wrong, catastrophically, tragically, fatally wrong, because miles above them, in the forests clinging to the mountainsides, Samuel of Bulgaria was not defeated. He was not scattered. He was not broken. He was waiting, patient as death, watching the Byzantine army prepare for its retreat with the cold satisfaction of a hunter who has driven his prey exactly where he wants them. High in the mountains, far above the Byzantine camp, Bulgarian warriors move silently through pine forests. They are dressed in fur and leather, practical clothes for mountain warfare, carrying spears and bows, knives tucked into their belts. These are not the heavily armored soldiers of the Byzantine army. They are lighter, faster, more suited to the terrain. Many of them are local men, shepherds and hunters who know these mountains the way a sailor knows the sea, who can move through paths that would seem impassable to outsiders. Their leader, Samuel, a man in his 40s with a powerful build, broad shoulders, thick arms, the body of a man who has spent his life in physical labor and combat, and a scar across his left cheek from a battle years earlier, crouches at the edge of a cliff. His eyes are like a wolf's, patient, predatory, missing nothing. He looks down at the Byzantine camp far below, counting fires, estimating numbers, calculating distances, and timing with the precision of a master strategist. He whispers to his lieutenant, Gavril, a younger and eager warrior, Samuel's cousin, who has followed him since the days of exile and rebellion. Gavril is barely 30, his beard still dark, his eyes bright with the anticipation of battle. How many? Scouts say 12,000, maybe more. Infantry, cavalry, baggage trains stretching for miles. They're slow, my lord. The wagons are bogged down in the mud. A slow, dangerous smile crosses Samuel's face. It is not a pleasant smile. It is the smile of a man who has hunted and killed, who knows exactly what is about to happen and takes satisfaction in the knowledge. Good. The more they bring, the more they'll leave behind. All that equipment, all those supplies, all that gold they looted from our villages. It all becomes ours. He stands, his joints creaking slightly. He is not young anymore, and the mountains are hard on the body, and looks at the narrow pass below. Trajan's gate, barely wide enough for 3 wagons side by side, with cliffs rising on both sides like the walls of a canyon, a perfect killing ground. When they enter the pass, we hit the front and rear simultaneously, seal them in, block both exits. The Romans will do the rest. Panic, crush each other, drown in their own fear. We don't need to kill them all. We just need to start the avalanche, and gravity will finish the work, Gavril asks, his voice betraying excitement barely held in check. And the Emperor? Samuel pauses, then says, slowly, considering the possibilities, if God wills it, we take him alive. Imagine the ransom Constantinople would pay for their emperor. We could fund our kingdom for a decade. If not, his death will do. A dead emperor sends a message, too, that the Bulgarians cannot be conquered, that these mountains belong to us, that Rome's reach is not infinite. Samuel was everything Basil was not. Born not in palace halls of marble and gold, but in the chaos of rebellion and exile, when Bulgaria was conquered and its royal family scattered or killed. Forged not by tutors lecturing from ancient texts, but by survival, by hiding in forests when Byzantine soldiers came searching, by learning to fight because the alternative was death, by understanding that power comes not from birthright, but from the willingness to seize it and the strength to hold it. He had learned warfare in the mountains, where victory belonged to those who understood the land better than their enemy, where the man who knew the hidden paths and secret valleys had an advantage no amount of armor or training could overcome, where patience mattered more than courage, and timing mattered more than numbers. And he understood these mountains perfectly. He had grown up here, played in these valleys as a child, hunted deer and wolves through these forests as a young man, fled through these passes when the Byzantines conquered his homeland. Every ridge, every ravine, every possible ambush site was mapped in his mind with perfect clarity. Dawn breaks over the Bulgarian wilderness, cold and grey, the sun struggling to penetrate the heavy clouds. The Byzantine army breaks camp with the practiced efficiency of professional soldiers. Soldiers load wagons with remaining supplies, mount horses, form columns according to their units. The mood is tired but relieved. They're going home. Back to warm barracks, hot meals, wine, women. Back to civilization. The nightmare of this campaign will soon be just a memory. Basil mounts his horse, a magnificent white stallion, a gift from a noble family seeking imperial favor. The horse is worth more than most soldiers will earn in a lifetime. He wears gilded armor that catches what little light penetrates the clouds, a purple cloak that marks his rank, and the imperial standard is carried before him by a dedicated standard bearer. For a moment, despite the failed campaign, despite the retreat, he looks every inch an emperor. Young, yes, but imperial, confident, in command. The imperial column stretched for nearly 2 miles, a serpent of men and horses and wagons winding through the mountain landscape. At the front, the emperor and his personal guard, elite cataphracts, heavy cavalry in armor so thick it could turn a spear, mounted on powerful horses bred specifically for carrying the weight. These are the best of the best, chosen from noble families, trained from childhood in the art of war. Behind them, heavy infantry from Thrace, the heartland of Byzantine military power, men who fight in the ancient Roman style with spear and shield, archers from Anatolia, skilled bowmen from the eastern provinces, and cavalry from Cappadocia, lighter than the cataphracts but still formidable, the eyes and ears of the army. Then came the baggage train, dozens of wagons loaded with siege equipment that would never be used, supplies that had sustained the army through its failed campaign, and the treasures looted from Bulgarian villages during the advance. Gold, silver, religious artifacts, anything of value that could be carried away. The spoils of war that were supposed to make the campaign worthwhile, even though its strategic objectives had failed. It was a magnificent sight, even in retreat. The pride of Byzantium, marching in perfect order, banners streaming, armor gleaming, 1,000 years of military tradition on display. The heirs of Rome, marching through mountains the ancient emperors had once conquered. But in war, order is fragile. It takes only a moment to shatter. A single arrow, a single moment of panic, and the most disciplined army can become a mob. The army enters Trajan's gate as the morning mist still clings to the ground. The pass narrows dramatically, the walls of the canyon closing in from both sides. On both sides, sheer cliffs rise hundreds of feet, crowned with pine trees, their branches heavy with snow. The road, barely worthy of the name, becomes a muddy track barely wide enough for 3 wagons abreast. Snow has begun to fall, light at first, just a few flakes drifting down from the grey sky, then heavier until the air is thick with white. The crunch of thousands of boots on frozen ground mingles with the creak of wagon wheels, the jingle of armor and harness, the snorting of horses. And then, silence, an unnatural, oppressive silence. The wind dies, the birds stop singing. Even the sound of the army seems muffled, absorbed by the falling snow. A young soldier, barely 20, nervous in the way of men who sense danger but cannot name it, turns to his companion, a grizzled veteran of a dozen campaigns. "Do you hear that?" "Hear what?" "Nothing. No birds, no wind, just nothing." The mountains are holding their breath. The companion looks up at the ridges above, squinting through the falling snow. For a moment, he sees what he thinks are shadows moving between trees, dark shapes that could be men, or could be nothing, tricks of light and snow. But his instincts, honed by years of survival, scream warnings. Before he can speak, before he can shout a warning, the first arrow came without warning. An arrow slams into a soldier's throat with a wet thunk, punching through flesh and windpipe. He gurgles, his hands instinctively reaching for the shaft, eyes wide with shock and incomprehension. For a heartbeat, a single frozen moment in time, everyone freezes, staring at the body as it crumples to the ground, blood spreading across the snow in a crimson pool. Then reality crashes back. The sky darkens with arrows. Not dozens, but hundreds. then thousands. They pour down from both ridges like a black blizzard, like locusts, like the wrath of an angry god. The whistle of arrows in flight fills the air, a sound like wind through winter trees, but sharper, more deadly, a sound that soldiers will hear in nightmares for the rest of their lives. The thunk of impacts into shields sounds like hail on a roof, the sharper crack of arrows punching through armor, the wet sounds, which no one wants to think about but cannot ignore, of arrows finding flesh, screaming, horses shrieking in pain and terror, the sound of animals who know they are about to die but cannot understand why. Men crying out in a dozen different ways, shock, pain, fear, rage, orders being shouted that no one can hear over the chaos, prayers being screamed to saints and God and anyone who might be listening. A soldier screams, his voice breaking with panic, "Ambush! Ambush! They're above us!" Chaos erupts like a physical force, like a wave crashing over the column. Soldiers scramble for shields, but the tight formation makes movement almost impossible. Horses rear and bolt, wild-eyed with terror, their riders unable to control them. A cavalry horse, maddened by an arrow in its flank, crashes into a wagon, splintering wood and scattering supplies across the muddy ground. The tight formation of the column, meant to present an impressive display of military might, becomes its own death trap. Men are pressed together so tightly they can't raise weapons to defend themselves, can't run, can't take cover, can't do anything but die or wait to die. Basil shouts over the chaos, his voice nearly drowned out by the screaming and the impact of arrows. Form ranks, shield wall, face the heights. But his voice is lost in the pandemonium. Orders cannot reach through the noise and confusion. The careful training, the endless drills, all the preparation. It all dissolves in the face of ambush and terror. Near the front, his guards, men who signed on for exactly this kind of desperate fight, form a protective circle around him with practiced efficiency. These are professionals, men who have fought before, who don't panic when the arrows start flying. One takes an arrow in the shoulder, the barbed head punching through his mail shirt, but he doesn't even flinch. He simply snaps the shaft with one powerful hand and keeps his position, his sword ready, blood seeping through his armor but his face calm, almost bored. From the heights, Bulgarian warriors descended like wolves on wounded prey, like demons from a nightmare. They didn't charge in formation. There was no need for such niceties, no point in presenting a unified front. The Romans were trapped, packed together in the narrow pass with nowhere to run, like sheep in a pen. All the Bulgarians had to do was slaughter them. Bulgarian warriors swing down on ropes tied to trees, dropping onto the column with axes and spears, landing among the panicked soldiers like stones dropped into an anthill. Others run down steep paths that seem nearly vertical, impossible angles that no army in formation could follow, paths that only local men could know. They move with terrifying speed and precision, striking, killing, vanishing back into the trees before the Byzantines can organize a response. They are ghosts, appearing and disappearing everywhere and nowhere. Individual moments of horror unfold across the battlefield, each one a small tragedy in the larger catastrophe. A Byzantine officer, recognizable by his plumed helmet, trying to rally his men into some kind of defensive formation, shouting orders that might have worked if anyone could hear him. A Bulgarian warrior appears behind him, axe raised, and brings it down in a single efficient motion. The officer's head splits like a melon, and he topples forward, dead before he hits the ground. A wagon overturning, its wheels shattered by the press of panicked horses and men. It tips slowly at first, then faster, spilling gold coins and weapons into the mud. The coins scatter like raindrops, glinting in the dim light. Soldiers instinctively grab for them. Even in the midst of death, the instinct for plunder is strong, but most die with Byzantine gold clutched in their fists. A horse, maddened by arrows stuck in its hide like porcupine quills, rears and comes down on its own rider. The man's scream is cut short by the crushing weight. The horse continues to thrash, its hooves becoming weapons, killing friends and enemies alike in its blind panic. General Bardus, blood streaming down his face from a cut above his eye. An arrow grazed his helmet, saving his life by a finger's width, grabs Basil's arm with desperate strength. "Majesty, we have to retreat. The army is breaking. If we don't withdraw now, we'll all die here." Basil's eyes are wild, refusing to accept reality, refusing to believe what his senses tell him. This cannot be happening. Not to him, not to a Roman army. No, if we hold, if we can just form up properly, if... An arrow slams into the ground, inches from Basil's foot, the impact so close he feels the wind of its passage. It sticks upright in the frozen mud, still vibrating. If it had been a hand's width to the left, the Emperor of Byzantium would be dead, and history would have taken a different path. "Emperor, go! Now! We hold!" say his guards. His voice carries the weight of absolute certainty. This is not a suggestion or a request. It is a statement of fact. "I can't abandon my army." Basil starts, but even as he speaks, he knows the words are hollow. The army is already abandoned. The army is already dead or dying. His most trusted guard grabs him by both shoulders, his massive hands like visors, forcing eye contact. His accent is thick, his voice like grinding stone. "You die here, empire dies. You run, empire lives. Do you understand? You are not a soldier here. You are the empire. Go!" Basil hesitates for one agonized moment, looking at the carnage around him. His soldiers dying, some calling out his name, some crying for their mothers, some simply screaming. His banners falling, trampled into the bloody mud. Everything he was taught about imperial dignity, about honor, about never retreating, all of it screaming at him to stay, to die if necessary with his men. Then survival instinct takes over. Self-preservation. The desperate animal need to live. He nods once, mounts his white horse, now spattered with blood that isn't its own, and spurs it forward, driving his heels into its flanks. Basil fled. There is no other word for it, no euphemism that can disguise what happened. The Emperor of the Romans fled the field of battle. With a dozen guards, the fastest riders, the best horses, he rode through the nightmare of Trajan's Gate, past burning wagons that sent pillars of black smoke into the grey sky, past dying men who reached out to him with bloody hands, begging for help he could not give, pleading for salvation he couldn't offer, past the wounded who would be left behind, who would freeze to death in the coming night or be found by Bulgarian soldiers and given the mercy of a quick death if they were lucky. Behind him, the imperial standard, purple and gold, the double-headed eagle of Byzantium that had flown over 1,000 battlefields, was pulled from its bearer's dead hands and trampled into the mud, ground under the boots of panicking soldiers and the hooves of terrified horses. The banner that was supposed to rally troops, that was supposed to be a symbol of invincibility, reduced to a muddy rag. Basil and his guards thunder through the pass, their horses' hooves throwing up sprays of bloody snow. The snow is falling heavily now, and the world is a blur of white and red, the two colors mixing in ways that would haunt Basil's dreams for decades. They burst out of the southern end of the pass, and for a moment there is open ground ahead. Freedom, escape, life. But then Basil pulls his horse to a halt, something in him refusing to keep running without looking back. He turns in his saddle, looking back at what he is leaving behind. From this distance, perhaps a mile from the pass, he can see the full scope of the disaster. The pass is clogged with bodies, hundreds of them, thousands perhaps, already being covered by the falling snow. Burning wagons sending smoke signals of defeat into the sky, and Bulgarian warriors moving through the wreckage like reapers in a field, systematically killing the wounded, looting the dead, gathering Byzantine weapons and armor for their own use. His face, if anyone were close enough to see it, shows the exact moment when the reality hits him, when the full weight of what has happened crashes down like a physical blow. This isn't just a defeat. This isn't a minor setback that can be overcome. This is annihilation. This is the destruction of everything he had brought to Bulgaria, the waste of months of planning and preparation, the deaths of thousands of men who followed him because they believed he knew what he was doing. Constantine, one of the guards, wounded, an arrow embedded in his thigh, blood seeping around the shaft, and breathing hard, his face pale with pain and shock, speaks urgently. "Majesty, we have to keep moving. They might pursue. We're not safe yet." Basil says nothing, just stares at the catastrophe he has created through his arrogance, his inexperience, his assumption that imperial dignity was a shield against reality. Snow settles on his shoulders, on his hair, melting against his skin. His horse shifts nervously beneath him, wanting to run, sensing its rider's distress. Of the 12,000 men who entered Trajan's gate that morning, confident, professional soldiers, the best Byzantium could field, fewer than 3,000 escaped. The rest were dead, their bodies already being covered by snow, soon to be frozen monuments to imperial hubris, or captured, facing slavery or ransom if they were noble, death if they were common soldiers, or scattered into the wilderness where winter would claim them, where they would die alone in the mountains, their bodies not found until spring thaw. The Byzantine army, the proud force that had defended Christendom for centuries, that had turned back Persians and Arabs and Goths and every other enemy that dared challenge the empire, had been destroyed in a single afternoon by a Bulgarian warlord and his mountain fighters. And the emperor who had led them there rode back to Constantinople in silence, his armor still gleaming, polished and perfect, untouched by battle, his hands unstained by blood, but his soul marked by a wound that would never heal, a scar deeper than any blade could cut. Basil rides alone through a winter landscape, through fields of snow unmarked except by his horse's hooves. His guards follow at a distance, giving him space, understanding without words that he needs solitude. He looks like a ghost, hollow, lost, a man who has seen something that has fundamentally changed him. The emperor who left Constantinople is dead. What rides toward the city is something else entirely, something harder, colder, something forged in the fires of utter defeat. Part 2. The Weight of Failure. Constantinople rises from the sea, its great walls topped with banners and watchtowers. Ships crowd the Golden Horn. The city is magnificent and utterly indifferent to the disaster in the north. News of Trajan's gate reached the capital before Basil did. Survivors straggled in, bringing tales of ambush and slaughter. Within days, the entire city knew. The emperor had been humiliated. The imperial palace is a labyrinth of marble corridors, mosaics depicting ancient victories, gardens with fountains. But the beauty is cold, formal, lifeless. Courtiers in the halls whisper behind jeweled hands. When Basil passes, they bow, but their eyes hold contempt. One elderly courtier, dripping with silk and gold, murmurs to another. The son of Romanos, fleeing like a common soldier. His grandfather would have wept. His grandfather would have had him blinded and exiled, the other replies. The boy is weak, unfit. The first leans in, voice dropping. There are others more suited to the purple. Bardas Skleros holds the east. Bardas Phocas commands legions in Anatolia. Either would make a proper emperor. The second smiles. Perhaps they will before long. In his private chambers, Basil stands alone at a window, looking out at the sea. He hasn't removed his travel-stained cloak. Dirt still streaks his face. His eyes are hollow. For 3 days, Basil didn't speak, didn't eat, didn't sleep. He stood at that window, watching the sun rise and set over the city he ruled, but couldn't seem to protect. His servants whispered that he was broken. His ministers began making plans for a regency. Even the patriarch sent priests to check on his sanity. But Basil was not broken. He was thinking. Brief, fragmented images flash through his mind. The arrows falling, the screaming, the imperial banner in the mud. Samuel's warriors descending from the heights. Basil closes his eyes, his jaw tightening. Never again, he whispers to himself. He turns from the window. For the first time in days, there is something in his eyes. Not despair, but cold, burning determination. On the 4th night, Basil walked alone to the Palace of Daphne, a sacred chapel within the palace complex. He dismissed his guards, locked the doors, and knelt before the icon of Christ Pantocrator. The chapel is lit only by candles. The icon is enormous, mosaic tiles forming Christ's face, stern, all-seeing. Basil kneels on cold stone, still in his armor. His voice shakes at first, then grows stronger. I have failed my soldiers, failed my empire, failed the legacy of Constantine, of Justinian, of all who came before me. He pauses. His hands clench into fists. I am 28 years old. I have lived in luxury, surrounded by teachers and servants and sycophants who told me I was chosen by God. But God does not choose the unworthy. God does not protect the weak. He looks up at the icon, tears streaming down his face, but his voice is hard as iron. So I make this vow before you. I will no longer be weak. I will strip away everything that made me soft. No more feasts, no more music, no more women, no marriage, no heirs. I will become a soldier, a monk, a weapon. He stands, drawing his sword, a beautiful blade, gilded and jeweled. He looks at it with something like disgust, then deliberately sets it at the foot of the icon. And I swear this: Bulgaria will fall. Samuel will kneel before me, or he will die. I will reclaim every inch of Roman land he has stolen. And when I am finished, the world will remember that an empire is not built on gold and silk. It is built on iron and will. He stands there, breathing hard, backlit by candlelight, smaller than expected, but somehow larger at the same time, as if something fundamental has changed in him. That night, a new Basil was born. Not the boy who fled Trajan's gate, but something colder, harder, less human. The monks called him pious. His soldiers would call him merciless. History would call him the Bulgar-Slayer. But first, he had to survive. A map of the Byzantine Empire would show threats from every direction. Bulgaria to the northwest, rebellions in Anatolia, Arab raids in the south. Because while Basil swore his oath in Constantinople, his empire was already tearing itself apart. In the east, Bardas Skleros, a general who had served Basil's father, raised the banner of rebellion, claiming the throne for himself. In the west, Bardas Phocas, another general from a powerful family, did the same. The empire was bleeding from multiple wounds, and like sharks sensing blood in the water, enemies closed in from every direction. Basil needed allies. But where could an emperor who trusted no one find loyalty? The answer came from the frozen north. Part 3. The Varangian Guard. In Kiev, 1,000 miles from Constantinople, ruled Vladimir of the Rus. He was a Viking by blood, a warlord by training, and a pagan by tradition, though that was about to change. Inside Vladimir's hall, the air is thick with smoke and the smell of roasted meat. Warriors drink from horns and boast of past battles. Vladimir himself sits on a carved throne, massive and red-bearded, missing 2 fingers on his left hand. Before him stands a Byzantine ambassador named Gregory, a Greek man in his 50s who looks distinctly uncomfortable in this barbarian setting. "And so, Prince Vladimir," Gregory says carefully, "the Emperor Basil proposes an alliance. You provide soldiers, 6,000 of your finest warriors, to help crush the rebels threatening Constantinople." Vladimir takes a long drink, amused. "And in return?" Gregory hesitates. "In return, a marriage. The Emperor's sister, the Princess Anna of the imperial blood, would become your wife." The hall goes silent. Every warrior stops mid-drink, mid-sentence. This is unprecedented. Byzantine princesses do not marry barbarian kings. Vladimir leans forward, suddenly very serious. "His sister, a porphyrogenitor, born in the purple." "Yes, my lord." "And what does he want, really?" Gregory chooses his words carefully. He wants soldiers who owe loyalty to gold and honor, not to Byzantine politics. Men who will fight for him, not against him. Vladimir laughs, a huge booming sound. "He wants my Varangians, the axemen, the reavers." "Yes." Vladimir stands, pacing. His warriors watch him closely. "There is one more thing. If I send him 6,000 warriors, if I marry his sister and bind my kingdom to his... I do not do so as a pagan. I would require baptism, recognition as a Christian king." Gregory looks surprised but pleased. "The Emperor would welcome your conversion, my lord. It would strengthen both our realms." Vladimir looks around at his hall, the carved idols in the corners, the old ways represented in every beam and banner. Then he nods. Decision made. "Tell your emperor. He will have his warriors, and I will have my princess." The deal was struck. Vladimir accepted Christian baptism, cementing an alliance that would reshape Eastern Europe for centuries. And from the frozen forests of the north, 6,000 warriors began the long march south. They called themselves Varangians, rovers, wanderers. They were the youngest sons of northern jarls, warriors who sought fortune and glory beyond their crowded homelands. Some had raided as far as Baghdad. Others had served in the Rus Guard. All of them were killers. The Varangian warriors assembled, giants compared to the average Byzantine soldier. Norsemen, Swedes, Danes, some as tall as 6.5 feet. They wear mail and fur, carry massive 2-handed axes called Dane axes, and their bodies are covered in tattoos, serpents, ravens, runes. Among them is one called Thorvald. He sharpens his axe, a weapon nearly as tall as a man, its edge gleaming. He speaks to a younger Varangian named Björn. They say Constantinople is the richest city in the world, streets paved with marble, churches roofed in gold. Björn's eyes are eager, and will be guarding the emperor himself, the Basileus, God's chosen. Thorvald offers a grim smile, or will be dying for him. Either way, will be well paid. The Varangians marched south through snow-covered steppes, then through mountain passes, finally emerging onto the plains approaching Constantinople. When the Varangians reached Constantinople in 988 AD, the city had never seen anything like them. Citizens lined the streets as they marched through the gates, towering warriors in foreign armor, axes gleaming in the sun, their faces marked with scars and frostbite. Children hid behind their mothers. Merchants stared in awe and fear. Even the palace guards, elite cataphracts who feared no enemy, shifted uneasily. In the throne room, the Varangians are presented to Basil. He sits on the throne, wearing full imperial regalia. Purple robes, crown, the orb and scepter. But his eyes are different from before, harder, more calculating. Thorvald steps forward as the leader of the Varangian contingent. He doesn't bow, simply plants his axe on the marble floor with a thunderous clang and meets Basil's gaze directly. Basil speaks in Greek, which a translator renders into Norse. "You are the warriors of the Rus?" Thorvald replies in Norse, translated to Greek. "We are Varangians, Basilius. We fight for gold and honor. Vladimir has sent us to serve you. And if I order you to kill my enemies, including other Romans..." Thorvald doesn't hesitate. "If you pay us, we kill who you tell us to kill. We are sworn to you, not to your empire. You want Romans dead. Romans die." A shocked murmur runs through the Byzantine courtiers. Such bluntness is unthinkable in the formal court. But Basil smiles, the first time he has smiled since Trajan's gate. It's not a warm smile. "Good, because I have many enemies, and most of them are Romans." Basil took the Varangians into his personal service, binding them with gold and oaths. They became his Varangian Guard, an elite unit answering only to the emperor. Unlike Byzantine soldiers, they had no loyalty to aristocratic families, no ties to the provinces, no political ambitions. They were foreigners, outsiders, and that made them perfect. The Varangians train, integrate into palace life, but remain distinct, drinking in separate halls, maintaining their own customs, always armed. With the Varangians at his side, Basil turned to face his internal enemies. The rebellions of Bardas Skleros and Bardas Phocas were about to meet an emperor they did not recognize, a man who had learned that mercy was weakness, that trust was fatal, and that survival required absolute ruthlessness. The civil war was about to begin. Basil rides at the head of an army, wearing armor. The Varangian Guard marches behind him, their axes catching the light. He looks like a different man, entirely from the youth who fled Trajan's gate, older, grimmer, dangerous. He speaks to his generals. "No negotiations, no pardons. When we meet them in battle, we destroy them completely." General Constantine objects. "Majesty, these are Romans, our own people." Basil cuts him off. "They are traitors, and traitors do not deserve mercy." Constantine falls silent, disturbed but obedient. In 989, Basil's forces met Bardas Phocas at the Battle of Abydos. It was a bloody, desperate fight, Roman against Roman, brother against brother. But when the Varangians entered the field, axes swinging in great arcs that shattered shields and split armor, the rebel lines broke. Phocas himself was killed, some say by an arrow, others by a stroke, brought on by seeing his army routed. Bardas Skleros, seeing Phocas dead and the imperial forces triumphant, surrendered. Basil could have had him executed. Instead, he invited Skleros to dinner. In a private dining chamber, Basil sits across from Bardas Skleros, a man in his 60s with one eye and a grey beard. Between them is a table laden with food that neither man is eating. Skleros speaks first. "You surprise me, Majesty. I expected the headsman, not hospitality." I can still summon him, if you prefer. A tense pause. Skleros asks carefully, "Why spare me?" "Because I want you to see what I'm going to build. I want you to watch as I prove every one of you wrong. You thought I was weak. You thought I would break." He leans forward, voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "Instead, I will make this empire stronger than it has been in 300 years. And you, Bardas, will live long enough to see it. That is your punishment." Skleros stares at him, seeing something in Basil's eyes that chills him to the bone. Skleros lived out his days in comfortable exile, watching as Basil transformed the empire. The rebellion was over. The throne was secure. And now, after years of delay, Basil could return to the vow he had made in that darkened chapel. Bulgaria. Basil stands before a map of the Balkans. His finger traces the borders of Bulgarian territory. "Samuel," he says quietly, almost to himself, "I'm coming for you." Part 4. The Enemy, Samuel of Bulgaria. While Basil had been fighting civil wars, Samuel of Bulgaria had been building an empire. He was not born to it. In his youth, Bulgaria had been conquered, its kings overthrown, its people scattered. But Samuel survived, escaped, rallied the remnants of Bulgarian resistance, and through sheer force of will, carved out a kingdom from the ruins. The Bulgarian kingdom is a land of timber fortresses, mountain strongholds, and wild forests. It is poor but fierce, held together by pride and defiance. Unlike Constantinople's marble and gold, this is a realm forged in hardship. Samuel's court at Ohrid, on the shores of Lake Ohrid, is simpler than Constantinople, more hall than palace. But there's a fierce energy here, a sense of purpose. Samuel sits with his war council, Gavril, his cousin and general, Radomir, his son, and other chieftains. "The Romans are weak," Samuel says. "Basil spent years fighting his own generals. His army is fractured. His nobility despises him. This is our moment." Gavril nods. "We've raided Thrace, burned a dozen villages. The Romans haven't responded." Radomir, younger and impetuous, adds eagerly, "Because they can't. They fear us now, father, after Trajan's gate." Samuel cuts him off, but not unkindly. "Don't mistake caution for fear. Basil is consolidating. When he moves, he will move with purpose." He stands, pacing before the fire. "I know emperors. I fought 3 of them. They think like accountants, calculating costs, measuring risks. But this one is different." "Different how?" Radomir asks. Samuel doesn't answer immediately. He stares into the flames. "I humiliated him at Trajan's gate, destroyed his army, sent him running like a dog. Most men would hate me for that. Basil, I think he thanks me." Gavril looks confused. "Thanks you?" "Because I taught him that mercy is weakness, that pride is fatal. I made him hard, and now he's going to use that hardness against me." A heavy silence falls over the council. Samuel continues, "So we prepare, fortify every pass, every valley, train every boy old enough to hold a spear. Because when Basil comes, and he will come, it won't be for a siege or a raid. It will be to erase us from the earth." Samuel was right to worry, because in 1000 AD, Basil launched the campaign that would define both their lives. It did not begin with a dramatic battle. There was no grand declaration of war. Instead, Basil did something no Byzantine emperor had ever attempted. He invaded Bulgaria in December. The Byzantine army marches through snow. Soldiers wrap themselves in furs, their breath forming clouds. Supply wagons struggle through drifts. A Bulgarian scout reports to Samuel, frost clinging to his beard. "The Romans are advancing, but it's winter, my lord. They can't possibly." Samuel interrupts. "They can, and they are." He looks out at the snow-covered mountains, his expression grim. Basil has learned from our tactics. Use the terrain, use the weather. Never fight when the enemy expects it. "What do we do?" Gavril asks. "We make him bleed for every mile." And so began the long war. Not a war of great battles, but of grinding attrition. Basil's strategy was methodical. Advance, fortify, advance again. Build roads through the mountains so supplies could flow. Establish garrisons so retreat was impossible. Turn conquest into administration. He called it the Furioi chain, a network of fortresses, each one supporting the next, slowly closing around Bulgaria like a noose. Years pass in a grinding campaign. Byzantine engineers build roads. Soldiers construct wooden forts that become stone fortresses. Tax collectors follow the army, establishing Byzantine authority. Bulgarian raiders harass supply lines, but are driven back, slowly, inexorably. The Byzantine border pushes north. For 14 years, this chess match continued. Samuel would strike fast, raiding, ambushing, melting into the hills. Basil would respond slow, building, consolidating, never overextending. To outsiders, it seemed indecisive. No great victories, no crushing defeats. Just two old men locked in a duel of wills, neither giving an inch. But wars are not won by brilliance alone. They are won by logistics, by gold, by the ability to outlast your enemy. And Byzantium, for all its flaws, could outlast anyone. Bulgarian strongholds, one by one, fall to Byzantine siege. Not through dramatic assault, but through patient encirclement and starvation. At each siege, Basil is present, never rushing, always calculating. His hair is graying now, lines etched deep around his eyes. General Constantine, now older and loyal, reports, "Vidin has surrendered, Majesty." Basil barely looks up from his maps. "Garrison it. 400 men. Appoint a governor. Move the supply depot from Serdica." And the prisoners? Feed them. Send them home with a message for Samuel. "Surrender, and I will be merciful." Constantine hesitates. "Do you mean that, Majesty?" "The mercy." Basil looks up, his eyes cold. "No, but Samuel doesn't need to know that yet." By 1014, Bulgaria was on the verge of collapse. Samuel's kingdom had shrunk to a core around Ohrid. His soldiers were exhausted, his treasury empty, his people starving. Basil, meanwhile, commanded an army of 30,000, well-fed, well-paid, and utterly obedient. The end was near. Both men could feel it. And then came Kleidion. Part 5. The Battle of Kleidion. The Kleidion Valley in summer, 1014, is a narrow gorge between towering mountains, the Belasica range that forms the natural border between what is Bulgarian and what is Byzantine. It's brutally hot, the kind of heat that makes armor feel like an oven, where men can die from heat stroke before they ever see combat. The sun beats down on bare rock with merciless intensity, creating shimmering waves of heat that distort vision and drain strength. This is no place for heavily armored soldiers, yet here they are, 30,000 Byzantine troops arrayed before a fortified position that seems impregnable. Kleidion was Samuel's last stronghold guarding the approach to Ohrid. A narrow valley, easily defended, impossible to bypass. If it fell, the capital was exposed, defenseless. The war was over. Samuel knew this. Basil knew this. Every soldier on both sides knew this. The next few days would decide everything. Samuel knew this with the clarity of a man who has nothing left to lose. So he did what cornered animals do when flight is impossible. He prepared to fight to the death, to take as many enemies with him as possible, to make the Byzantines pay such a price for victory that it would feel like defeat. Bulgarian fortifications stretch across the entire width of the gorge, an impressive display of military engineering accomplished with limited resources. Wooden walls 20 feet high, reinforced with earth and stone, making them resistant to both fire and battering rams. Sharpened stakes driven into the ground at precise angles, creating a maze that would channel attackers into kill zones. Pits dug and covered with branches and dirt, waiting to swallow horses and men. Archers positioned on the heights with clear fields of fire, protected by stone barricades that would require artillery to dislodge. It's a masterwork of defensive warfare, designed by a man who has spent decades studying how to defeat superior forces. Samuel walks the defenses personally, inspecting everything with the eye of a perfectionist who knows that a single weak point can undo everything. He's older now, 54 years old, his beard more gray than black, his joints aching in the morning, his body bearing the scars of a lifetime of warfare. But his mind is as sharp as ever, and his will undiminished. He addresses his men, and his voice carries the weight of shared experience and mutual respect. These are not subjects listening to a monarch. These are comrades listening to a leader they chose to follow. This is where we hold, not one step back. You understand? Not one. They want our land. They'll have to bury us in it. The soldiers respond raggedly. They're exhausted, underfed, many wounded from previous skirmishes, but with genuine determination. Yes, my lord, for Bulgaria, for Samuel. The Romans think they can starve us out, wait us out. They think we'll break, surrender, beg for mercy. He pauses, looking at each group of men, making eye contact, ensuring they understand. But summer is short in these mountains. If we hold for a month, 2 months, the snows will come early this year. I can feel it in my bones. And then they'll be the ones trapped, cut off from their supply lines, freezing in their camps. He climbs onto the wall with an agility that belies his age, looking out at the Byzantine camp in the distance, tents stretching to the horizon, an ocean of canvas and leather. Banners snapping in the hot wind, the double-headed eagle visible on dozens of standards, each representing a different unit. Smoke from countless cooking fires creating a haze over the valley. It looks like a city has been transplanted to the wilderness, a city dedicated entirely to war. He speaks quietly to Gavril beside him, his cousin and general, the man who has been with him since the beginning, through exile and rebellion and the long years of war. How many do they have? 30,000 at least, maybe more. Our scouts report reinforcements arriving every day from Thrace. Basil is throwing everything he has at us. And we have 15,000, and that's counting the walking wounded, the boys we armed last week, the old men who can barely hold a spear. Gavril's voice is grim but steady. He's a realist, not given to false optimism. Samuel nods slowly, doing the mathematics of survival in his head. But they're fighting for conquest, for glory, for an emperor most of them have never seen, while our men are fighting for their homes, their families, for the right to exist. That counts for something. Gavril considers this, then responds with brutal honesty. It does. But against Basil? I'm not sure it counts for enough. He's not the boy you broke at Trajan's gate anymore. He's become something else, something colder than winter. In the Byzantine camp, organized with the mathematical precision that is Basil's hallmark, Everything has its place. Supply tents in neat rows, weapon storage areas guarded and inventoried, medical facilities staffed by physicians brought from Constantinople. Basil has learned from his disasters that wars are won by logistics as much as courage, that an army marches on its stomach, that organization defeats inspiration every time. Basil himself walks through the camp, inspecting troops, checking supplies, ensuring nothing is left to chance. He's 56 years old now, his hair completely grey, his face deeply lined, moving with the careful deliberation of a man whose body has begun to fail, but whose will remains iron. The Varangian Guard marches past during their drill, their axes gleaming in the sun, moving in perfect unison despite the heat. Basil pauses to watch them, and something like pride flickers across his face. These men have served him for 26 years, have never wavered, never betrayed, never failed. Thorvald, now greying and scarred, but still massive, his beard white as winter snow, acknowledges his emperor with a nod. Emperor. "How are your men?" Basil asks, and there's genuine concern in his voice. These Varangians are more than just soldiers to him. They're the only men in the empire he truly trusts. "Ready. We've been waiting for this for many years. Some of us." Thorvald's voice has changed with age, rougher now, but still carrying that grinding stone quality. 20 years. Yes. Basil looks toward the Bulgarian fortifications in the distance, and his voice becomes introspective, almost melancholy. "I was 28 when Samuel destroyed my army. Do you know how old I am now, Thorvald?" 56, Basilius. Basil offers a bitter smile that doesn't reach his eyes. 56. I've spent half my life on this. Half my life chasing one man through these mountains. Building roads he destroys. Taking fortresses he reclaims. Fighting a war that seems to have no end. Soon it will be over. Yes, one way or another. Either I break him, or he breaks me. There's no third option anymore. The siege began in July, as the heat reached its peak. Basil's forces attacked the Bulgarian positions day after day, wave after wave of assaults designed to probe for weaknesses, to exhaust the defenders, to test their resolve. But Samuel's defenses held like a rock against surf. The gorge was too narrow for cavalry to maneuver, eliminating Basil's advantage in mounted troops. The fortifications were too strong to take by direct assault, without catastrophic losses that even Basil, with his willingness to spend lives, could not justify. Byzantine soldiers charged the barricades in the merciless afternoon heat, their armor cooking them like meat in a pot. Officers shout encouragement, "For the Emperor, for Rome, for Christ." But the words ring hollow when arrows and stones rain down from above, when men fall screaming with stakes driven through their bodies, when the wounded crawl back, leaving trails of blood in the dirt. Men scream, not the quick screams of clean death, but the prolonged agony of terrible wounds. An arrow through the stomach, where death comes slowly over hours. A leg shattered by a thrown stone, bone fragments visible through torn flesh. Burns from Greek fire, the liquid flame that sticks to skin and cannot be extinguished. The assault fails, as it has failed every day for weeks. Bodies are dragged back under cover, the living pulling the dead and dying. The medical tents fill with wounded who scream for wine to dull the pain, for priests to hear their confessions, for their mothers, even though they're hundreds of miles away. The smell of death hangs heavy over the valley. Rotting flesh, gangrene, the metallic stench of blood baking in the sun. Vultures circle above, patient, knowing they will feast soon. At night in the Byzantine camp, the heat gives way to a chill that makes men shiver in their sweat-soaked clothes. Basil sits in his tent with his generals, and the atmosphere is tense. Maps spread everywhere, covered with marks showing defensive positions, attack routes tried and failed, supply lines stretched to their limit. He looks exhausted, older than his years, the weight of command pressing down on shoulders that have carried it for 3 decades. General Nikephoros Xiphias, a lean man in his 40s with cunning eyes that miss nothing, speaks with careful precision. "We can't break through the front, Majesty. Their position is too strong. Every assault costs us 100 men, 200 men, and we gain nothing. At this rate, we'll run out of soldiers before they run out of arrows." General Constantine, who has served Basil since the beginning, who was there at Trajan's gate and every battle since, suggests the obvious solution. Then we wait. Starve them out. Surround the valley completely. Cut off their supplies. They'll surrender eventually. "They have to." "No," Basil says firmly, his hand slapping the map with surprising force. "Samuel is right. Winter will come before they starve, and I will not spend another winter in these mountains. I will not give him time to somehow slip away, to rebuild once again. This ends now. This summer. Whatever it takes." Silence falls over the tent. The generals exchange worried glances. They've seen this mood in Basil before. The absolute refusal to accept limitations, the willingness to do whatever is necessary, regardless of cost. Nikephoros speaks up, his voice carefully neutral. "There may be another way." Basil's head snaps up, his eyes suddenly laser-focused. "Speak." The cliffs to the west of the valley. The Bulgarians think they're impassable. No army could climb them, especially not in armor. They have no guards posted there because they believe nature is guard enough. But a small force, lightly armed, moving at night. It could be done. Difficult, yes. Dangerous, absolutely. Most of the men would probably die in the attempt. But possible. Constantine objects immediately, his voice sharp with concern. "That's suicide, Nikephoros. Those cliffs are nearly vertical. I've seen them myself. One slip and you fall 200 feet onto rocks. Even mountain goats would struggle with that climb." Nikephoros remains calm, his eyes never leaving Basil's face. "Yes, but if we succeed, we come out behind their lines. Their fortifications face south, toward us. If we attack from the north, simultaneously with a frontal assault..." Basil finishes the thought, and there's something predatory in his expression. They collapse inward, trapped between 2 forces with nowhere to retreat. Perfect. He stands, moving to the map with renewed energy, his exhaustion seemingly forgotten. His finger traces the route with precision, calculating distances, timing, logistics. "How many men would you need?" 1,000, maybe 1,500. Enough to create chaos and hold the position until the main force can break through. Any more and we'd be spotted during the approach or climb. Constantine presses his objection, his concern genuine. "And how many would survive the climb? Half? A third?" Nikephoros meets his gaze without flinching. "Enough. Enough to do what needs to be done." Basil studies the map for a long moment, his mind working through possibilities, calculating acceptable losses, weighing the price of victory against the cost of delay. Then he nods decisively. "Do it." Nikephoros Xiphias was a cold, brilliant strategist, one of the few generals Basil truly trusted, a man who understood that war was about mathematics and psychology as much as courage. For the next 3 days, while the main army continued its futile but necessary assaults on the fortifications, To keep the Bulgarians focused on the southern approach, Nikephoros gathered his men in secret, moving them to assembly points under cover of darkness. He addresses his soldiers, all volunteers, all stripped of heavy armor that would make the climb impossible. They carry only weapons, water, and rope. Looking at them, Nikephoros sees young men eager for glory, older veterans seeking one last great battle, men with debts who need the bonuses promised to survivors, men running from crimes who see this as redemption. I won't lie to you. Most of you will die. Maybe all of you. The climb is impossible, or at least that's what the Bulgarians think, which is why we're attempting it. The rock is loose, the handholds are minimal, and one mistake means a fall that will kill you before you can scream. The Bulgarians will see us at some point and rain arrows down. We'll be defenseless, clinging to cliff faces, perfect targets. And even if we make it to the top, if, not when, we'll be outnumbered when we attack. He pauses, looking at each man, giving them this last chance to reconsider. But if we succeed, we end this war. We save the empire from another winter campaign. We capture or kill Samuel and break Bulgarian resistance forever. And your names will be remembered for 1,000 years. Your children's children will tell stories about you. You'll be heroes, the men who won the war through courage and determination. The soldiers are silent, processing what they've heard, each man making his own calculation of risk and reward. Then one, a young man, barely 20 with the soft face of someone who has never needed to shave regularly, steps forward. His voice cracks slightly with nervous energy, but his determination is clear. I'll go. Another steps forward. This one, a grizzled veteran with scars across his face and arms, missing 2 fingers on his left hand. I've survived worse. Then another. And another. Within minutes, all 1,500 have volunteered, or at least none have backed out. Whether from courage or peer pressure, or the inability to show fear in front of comrades, they're committed. They began the climb at midnight under a moonless sky, darkness their greatest protection. No torches, light would betray them immediately. No voices, sound carries in the mountains. Just the sound of leather scraping on stone, the occasional clatter of a dislodged pebble, and the distant roar of the river far below. A constant reminder of what waits for those who fall. The climb is terrifying in ways that combat is not. In battle, you can fight back, can at least feel like you have some control over your fate. Here, there's nothing but rock and gravity, and the desperate strength in your fingers. Sheer rock face that seems to go up forever. Handholds barely large enough for fingers, requiring soldiers to support their entire body weight on tips of fingers wedged into tiny cracks. Men climbing in darkness, unable to see more than a few feet ahead, navigating by touch. Sweat mixing with dust, making hands slippery, every grip potentially the last. Muscles screaming, arms, legs, core, everything burning with the sustained effort. One man slips, his handhold crumbles, old rock giving way under his weight. He doesn't even scream, understanding instantly that screaming would doom everyone. He just vanishes into the black void below, a shadow falling into deeper shadow. A moment later, a wet thud echoes up from below. His companions pause for a heartbeat, whispering prayers, then continue climbing. Nikephoros climbs near the front, leading by example because he cannot ask men to do what he won't do himself. His face is set in grim concentration, every thought focused on the next handhold, the next foothold. His fingers are bleeding, nails torn, skin scraped raw against the rock. But he doesn't stop, cannot stop, because stopping means failure, and failure means the death of everyone who followed him. It took 3 days. 3 days of climbing during the day when they could see handholds, but risked being spotted by Bulgarian scouts, hiding at night in tiny ledges and crevices barely large enough for a man to wedge himself into, praying they wouldn't be seen or fall asleep and tumble to their deaths, eating nothing, no room in their packs for food, every bit of weight eliminated, drinking sparingly from their canteens, rationing water that must last, knowing that dehydration will kill as surely as a fall. Of the 1,500 who started, 200 fell, tumbled from cliff faces in the darkness, lost their grip when exhausted muscles finally gave out, slipped on loose rock, or simply gave up, letting go because death seemed preferable to more climbing. The rest climbed on, driven by determination or fear or simple inability to go back, which would have been as dangerous as going forward. Dawn of the 4th day breaks over the mountains. Nikephoros, his hands bloody and shaking, his whole body trembling with exhaustion, pulls himself over the final ledge, collapsing on flat ground with a gasp of relief. Behind him, his soldiers emerge one by one, gasping, bleeding, some crying with relief, but alive. They collapse on the ground, wanting nothing more than to sleep for a week. Below them, invisible through the morning mist that fills the valley like a lake, lie the Bulgarian fortifications. Specifically, the rear of the Bulgarian fortifications, the undefended side, the impossible approach that Samuel left unguarded, because no sane commander would attempt what Nikephoros has just accomplished. Nikephoros, his voice hoarse from thirst and exhaustion, speaks to his lieutenant, a veteran who has somehow kept climbing despite an injured leg. We rest for 1 hour, just one. Then we attack. Tell the men. 1 hour to catch their breath, bandage their wounds, prepare weapons. Then we end this. When the Byzantine horn sounded from behind the Bulgarian lines, that distinctive brass call that every soldier recognizes, that should have been impossible, that meant everything Samuel thought he knew was wrong. Samuel knew instantly what had happened, and he knew what it meant. The war was over. He had lost. On the fortifications, Samuel stands frozen as the impossible becomes real. He hears the horns from the wrong direction, from the north, from the cliffs he left unguarded because no one could climb them. His face goes pale, the blood draining away, and for a moment he looks every one of his 54 years. The weight of defeat crashes down like a physical blow. Gavril runs up, panicked in a way Samuel has never seen him, his usual calm shattered. "They're behind us! How is that possible?" "It doesn't matter how," Samuel says, and his voice is surprisingly calm, the calm of a man who has accepted the inevitable. "Signal the retreat to the secondary positions. We fall back to the narrows, try to establish a new defensive line." But it's too late, and both men know it. Nikephoros' force comes pouring down from the heights like an avalanche, screaming battle cries, slamming into the rear of the Bulgarian lines with the desperate fury of men who have just accomplished the impossible. At the same time, Basil, watching from his command position, seeing the signal he's been waiting for, orders a full assault from the south with every man he has. The battle erupts into chaos, Bulgarians trying to turn to face attackers from 2 directions, formations collapsing, panic spreading. Byzantine soldiers pour through breaches in the fortifications. Individual moments unfold. A Bulgarian warrior fighting back to back with his brother, both dying together. A young Bulgarian soldier dropping his weapon and running, only to be cut down. Gavril fighting desperately to hold a position before finally being overwhelmed. And through it all, Samuel fighting like a demon, his sword red to the hilt, his armor dented, his voice hoarse from shouting orders no one can hear anymore. Fall back to the forest, he screams to the men around him. He fights his way clear, a handful of bodyguards with him. They disappear into the trees as the Byzantine forces flood the valley. By sunset, the battle was over. The Bulgarian army had been annihilated. Bodies covered the valley floor so thickly you couldn't see the ground, and kneeling in the mud, hands bound, were 15,000 Bulgarian prisoners. Basil rides through the aftermath. His face is impassive as he surveys the carnage. He stops before the mass of prisoners, exhausted, bloody, terrified men. Thorvald and the Varangian Guard stand ready, their axes dripping red. General Constantine approaches, uncertain. Majesty, what are your orders regarding the prisoners? Basil is silent for a long moment, looking at the kneeling men. Some are barely more than boys. Others are old, grey-bearded. All are defeated. How many? 15,000, give or take. And if we ransom them? Samuel has no gold left. He can't pay. If we take them as slaves, we'd need to feed and guard them all the way to Constantinople, and they'd be a constant threat of rebellion. Basil dismounts, walks closer to the prisoners. He looks into their faces. They look back, some defiant, most just broken and afraid. Basil speaks quietly. Samuel took my army at Trajan's gate, killed thousands, humiliated me before the world. He turns to Constantine. I made a vow that Bulgaria would fall, not just its king, but its spirit, its will to resist. What are you saying, Majesty? Basil's voice is absolutely cold. Blind them, all of them. 100 men to a group, 99 completely blind, one left with a single eye to guide the others home. Stunned silence. Even Constantine, who has served Basil for decades, is horrified. Majesty, they are defeated. They pose no threat. This is... Basil cuts him off, voice rising. This is mercy. I could execute them. Instead, I'm sending them home. They will be with their families again. They will live out their lives. He leans in close to Constantine, voice dropping to a whisper that's somehow more terrible than shouting. But Samuel will see what I've done. Every family in Bulgaria will see, and they will know the price of defying Rome. Constantine responds barely audibly, "Yes, Majesty." What followed was horror beyond description. Byzantine soldiers weep as they obey orders. The Varangians, normally unflinching, turn away. Sounds of screaming go on and on and on. Later, the aftermath. 15,000 men, mutilated, being organized into groups of 100. The one-eyed leading the blind, stumbling northward. The process took days. Some soldiers who performed it lost their minds and had to be relieved. Others hardened themselves and continued. Basil watched it all. He did not flinch, did not look away. This was his order, his responsibility. And when it was done, he pointed the blinded prisoners north. He addresses the one-eyed leaders. Go home, tell Samuel what happened here. Tell him this is the price of rebellion. The long columns of blind men stumble through mountain passes, their guides calling out warnings about rocks and holes. The sound of thousands of feet shuffling, thousands of voices moaning in pain and despair, echoes through the mountains. Part 6. The Death of Bulgaria. Samuel escaped Kleidion with a handful of bodyguards, riding hard through mountain paths only he knew. He reached Ohrid 3 days after the battle, exhausted, wounded, but alive. He told his council the army was defeated, scattered. But he didn't know the full extent of what had happened. He didn't know what Basil had done to the prisoners. For days, Ohrid waited in anxious tension. The city knew defeat was coming, but not its shape. People tried to maintain normalcy. Markets still opened. Fishermen still cast their nets. Priests still led prayers. But everyone watched the mountain passes, waiting for news, waiting for survivors. Then, on the 5th day, someone shouted, pointing toward the mountain pass. When the survivors of Kleidion reached Ohrid, the city stopped. Fishermen dropped their nets. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Children hid behind their mothers. Because streaming down from the mountains came a nightmare given form. The blind soldiers enter the city, thousands of them, their eye sockets bandaged, blood seeping through, stumbling and crying out. The guides, themselves half blind, call desperately for families, for anyone who could help. A woman screams, running to embrace a blinded soldier. "Dmitri! Oh God, Dmitri!" All around, similar scenes. The entire city descends into chaos and grief. News spread instantly. The army was destroyed. 15,000 blinded. Basil had won. Samuel was in his hall, conferring with his son Radomir about their next moves, about whether to surrender or fight on, when the messenger burst in. A messenger, barely able to speak, enters. "My lord, the army, they're coming back." Samuel feels hope flickering. How many survived? "Many of them, my lord. Almost 15,000. Confused, Samuel stands. "Then why do you look like you're delivering news of a funeral?" The messenger cannot answer. He just gestures to the door. Samuel walks outside, and there, filling the square before his hall, are his soldiers, all of them blind. Thousands of empty, ruined faces turned toward the sound of his footsteps. Samuel stops, stares. His face goes slack, all color draining from it. A blind soldier calls out, "My lord, is that you?" Another, "We came home, my lord, just like you said we would." Samuel tries to speak. His mouth opens, but no sound emerges. He clutches his chest. Radomir grabs him. "Father!" Samuel collapses. Servants rush to catch him, but he's already gone, eyes open, staring at nothing, his face frozen in an expression of absolute horror. Samuel of Bulgaria died on October 6th, 1014. The physicians said it was his heart. But everyone who saw him that day knew the truth. Basil hadn't just defeated Samuel. He'd broken him, shattered his spirit so completely that his body simply gave up. Samuel's funeral is a somber procession through Ohrid. His body lies on a bier, covered in royal Bulgarian symbols. His people line the streets, weeping, not just for their king, but for their kingdom. With Samuel dead, Bulgarian resistance collapsed like a house of cards. His son Radomir tried to rally the nobles, but they were already negotiating surrender. Within weeks, Byzantine banners flew over Ohrid. Within months, Bulgaria as an independent kingdom ceased to exist. A map shows Bulgarian territory being absorbed into the Byzantine Empire. Fortresses are garrisoned, tax collectors arrive, priests of the Orthodox Church replace Bulgarian clergy. By 1018, 4 years after Kleidion, the conquest was complete. The Balkans, divided for centuries, were united under the double-headed eagle of Byzantium. It was the empire's greatest territorial extent in over 300 years. Basil had achieved what a dozen emperors before him had failed to do. But victory came with a price. Basil enters the Parthenon in Athens, now converted to a Christian church. He's older now, his hair completely grey, his face lined and hard. He walks slowly, his guards behind him. He kneels before the altar, alone. The church is silent except for the echo of his footsteps. He speaks quietly, almost a whisper. I did what I swore to do. Bulgaria is no more. The empire is safe. He pauses. His hands clench. So why do I feel nothing? In the years that followed, Byzantium prospered. Trade routes flourished. The treasury overflowed. The army, reformed and professional, stood ready to defend borders that stretched from the Danube to the Euphrates. But in Ohrid, in the villages of Macedonia and Thrace, the people remembered. They remembered the battle, the blinding, the death of their king. And they passed down songs, laments sung by mothers to their children, by old men around fires. In a Bulgarian village, an old woman sings to a young girl. The melody is haunting, mournful. She sings in Bulgarian. The emperor came from the south. With fire and iron and hate, he took our fathers and brothers and gave them to cruel fate. Samuel the king saw the ruin. His heart broke like glass. The blind came home, weeping through the mountain pass. Empires can conquer lands. They can destroy armies. They can erase kingdoms from maps. But they cannot kill memory. And memory, in the end, outlasts even emperors. Part 7. The Lonely Throne. Constantinople in 1020 is at its height. Prosperous, powerful, secure. Ships from across the world crowd the harbors. Markets overflow with silk, spices, furs, gold. In the final decade of his reign, Basil II ruled over an empire stronger than it had been in centuries. The borders were secure, the treasury was full, rebellions were crushed before they could even begin. He was 62 years old, and he had never married, never produced an heir, never taken a lover. He had kept his vow made in the chapel of Daphne 35 years earlier. He was the empire, and the empire was him. Nothing else mattered. In the throne room, Basil sits on the imperial throne, dressed in full regalia, but looking somehow diminished, smaller, older, wearier. Courtiers stand at a distance, speaking in hushed tones. A Venetian ambassador is being presented. He approaches nervously, bowing deeply. He speaks in Latin. "Your Imperial Majesty, the Doge of Venice sends his greetings and—" Basil interrupts, voice flat. "What does he want?" Caught off guard, the ambassador stammers. He wishes to strengthen trade relations between our cities. He proposes—" "Granted. Work out the details with my ministers. Next." The ambassador is ushered away, confused. Another supplicant approaches, a Byzantine noble seeking appointment to a provincial governorship. "Majesty, I have served your empire faithfully for—" Basil interrupts. "How old are you?" 42, Majesty." "Where did you serve in the Bulgarian campaigns?" I was in Constantinople, Majesty, managing supply logistics." Basil's voice is cold. "So you stayed safe in the capital, while others bled in the mountains. Request denied. Next." The noble retreats, red-faced. The courtiers exchange nervous glances. Basil had become what he needed to be, an emperor who trusted no one, loved nothing but the empire itself, and ruled through fear more than devotion. His ministers trembled in his presence. His generals obeyed without question. Even the Varangian Guard, those massive Norsemen who feared nothing, approached him with caution. He had become the most powerful emperor in centuries. And the loneliest. Late at night in Basil's private chambers, he sits alone at a desk covered in documents. Tax records, military reports, judicial rulings. A single candle burns. He looks exhausted. A knock at the door. Thorvald enters, much older now, his beard completely white, moving more slowly but still formidable. "Emperor, you should rest." Basil doesn't look up. There's too much to do. There's always too much to do. That is the nature of empire. Basil finally looks up, studying the old Varangian. "How long have you served me, Thorvald?" "For decades, Basilius. Since I was a young man, and you were also a young man." Basil offers a trace of a smile. "We're both old now, aren't we?" "Yes." Silence for a moment. "Do you remember Trajan's Gate?" "I was not there, Emperor. I came after." "Right, of course. That was before." He looks back down at his documents, but his eyes are unfocused. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd died there. If Samuel had killed me in that pass, would the Empire have been stronger? Would someone else have done what I did, but better?" Thorvald speaks firmly. "No one could have done what you did. You saved the Empire. At what cost? The cost was necessary." Basil looks up, his eyes haunted. 15,000 men, Thorvald. I ordered their eyes put out. I can still hear them screaming, even now. You did what you had to do. Basil stands, agitated. Did I? Or did I do it because I was angry? Because I wanted revenge for Trajan's Gate? Because I wanted Samuel to suffer as I had suffered? Thorvald doesn't answer. Can't answer. Basil speaks quieter. I told myself it was for the Empire, for security, to prevent future rebellions. But late at night, when I can't sleep, I wonder if I was lying to myself. He walks to the window, looking out at the darkened city. I am 62 years old. I have no wife, no children, no friends, only servants and soldiers. I have spent my entire life in service to this empire, and when I die, what will I leave behind? An empire that will endure. Basil turns, a bitter laugh escaping. Will it? I have no heir, Thorvald. When I die, the throne passes to my brother, Constantine, a man who has never held a sword, never made a hard decision in his life. He'll undo everything in a decade. Then name another heir, adopt a general, a nephew, and risk civil war? Risk someone seizing power before I'm even dead? No. He returns to his desk, slumping into the chair. The Empire will survive me. It has to. Because if it doesn't, then what was it all for? In 1025, Basil was planning his final campaign, the reconquest of Sicily from the Arabs. Fleets were assembled, troops mustered, plans were drawn up in meticulous detail. He was 67 years old, and he was still planning wars. At a war council, Basil stands before a map of Sicily, pointing to landing sites. His generals listen, taking notes. But Basil looks frail now, thinner, moving stiffly. We land here at Messina. Secure the port, then march west toward Palermo. The Arabs are divided, fighting among themselves. If we strike now... He stops suddenly, swaying. His hand goes to his chest. General Constantine stands quickly. Majesty? Basil waves him off. I'm fine, just tired. But he's not fine. He sits heavily, breathing hard. Continue the preparations. I'll review them tomorrow. The generals exchange worried glances, but bow and leave. Only Constantine remains. Majesty, you need a physician? What I need is to finish this campaign. Sicily must be... He breaks off, coughing. When he pulls his hand away from his mouth, there's blood on his fingers. Constantine is alarmed. I'm calling the physicians. Basil is too weak to argue. Fine, but tell them to hurry. We march in 3 weeks. The physicians came. They diagnosed a fever, prescribed rest. Basil ignored them and continued working. For 2 weeks, he declined. Slowly at first, then rapidly. He refused to stay in bed, insisting on attending councils, reviewing reports, making decisions. And then, on December 15th, 1025, he finally collapsed. In Basil's bedchamber, he lies in the imperial bed, covered in silk blankets, but shivering. Physicians hover nearby. Constantine sits by his side. Thorvald stands guard at the door. Basil's eyes open. He looks around, disoriented. Constantine? His voice is weak. Constantine leans close. I'm here, Majesty. The campaign. Sicily. It can wait. You need to rest. Basil tries to sit up. No, can't wait. The Arabs are... He falls back, too weak. His breathing is labored. I'm dying, aren't I? Constantine hesitates, then nods. Yes, Majesty. Basil closes his eyes for a moment. When he opens them again, there's something like relief in them. Good. I'm tired, Constantine, so tired. You've earned your rest. Have I? He looks at the ceiling, his voice growing fainter. I saved the Empire, united the Balkans, crushed every rebellion, built roads and fortresses, filled the treasury, reformed the army. I did everything I was supposed to do. Tears begin to run down his cheeks. But I never lived, never loved, never had a family. I turned myself into a tool, a weapon for the Empire to wield. And now that the work is done, he trails off. Constantine speaks gently. What, Majesty? Basil responds barely in a whisper. Now I'm just empty. Basil II died on December 15th, 1025, at the age of 67. His death was quiet, private, witnessed only by his brother, his physicians, and Thorvald of the Varangian Guard. There were no grand ceremonies, no public mourning. The emperor, who had ruled for nearly 50 years, simply stopped. The announcement of Basil's death brings tolling church bells. Citizens gather in the streets, uncertain how to feel. Some weep. Others stand in shocked silence. Many simply shrug and return to their daily lives. By Basil's own instructions, he was not buried in the imperial mausoleum with the other emperors. Instead, his body was placed in a simple tomb near the parade grounds where his soldiers drilled. The inscription was brief, just 8 words. From this place, I kept watch over the empire. No mention of victories, no list of conquests, just the plain truth. He had stood guard. And perhaps that was enough. Epilogue. The weight of empire. The Byzantine Empire, after Basil's death, begins to decline. Constantine VIII, Basil's brother, proves weak and ineffectual. Rebellions flare up. The borders begin to shrink again. Within 50 years, much of what Basil built is undone. Basil feared what would happen after his death, and his fears were justified. Constantine VIII ruled for only 3 years before dying himself. The emperors who followed were lesser men, politicians instead of soldiers, interested in luxury instead of duty. The Varangian Guard remained, but they served lesser masters. The army, without Basil's iron discipline, grew corrupt and complacent. The Balkans, forcibly united under Byzantine rule, began to fracture again. In 1071 AD, at the Battle of Manzikert, Byzantine forces are crushed by the Seljuk Turks. The emperor is captured. The eastern frontier collapses. In 1071, just 46 years after Basil's death, the Byzantine army suffered a catastrophic defeat at Manzikert. The eastern provinces fell to the Turks. The empire was reduced to a fraction of its former size. All of Basil's carefully constructed defenses crumbled within 2 generations. In 1204 AD, during the Fourth Crusade, Western knights sack Constantinople, looting the churches, burning libraries, desecrating the city Basil had protected. In 1204, Constantinople itself fell, not to Muslims, but to Christian crusaders who sacked the city they were supposed to protect. The Byzantine Empire limped on for another 2 centuries, a shadow of its former glory. In 1453, Constantinople finally fell to the Ottoman Turks, and the last remnants of Rome's Eastern Empire died. In the present day, ruins of Bulgarian fortresses remain. The mountains where Basil campaigned still stand. Lake Ohrid, still beautiful, is now a tourist destination. So was it all for nothing? Did Basil sacrifice his humanity, blind 15,000 men, spend 50 years in warfare, only to delay the inevitable? Perhaps, but empires are not eternal. Nothing is. The question is not whether they will fall, but what they accomplish while they stand. At a Bulgarian folk festival, people dance and sing the old songs, including the lament about Samuel and the blinding. In Bulgaria, the memory of Samuel persists. He's remembered as a hero, a defender against foreign invasion. Songs about him are still sung. His kingdom is still mourned. Basil, by contrast, is remembered as a monster, the Bulgar-Slayer who destroyed an empire and broke its people. At the Parthenon in Athens, tourists visit. A small plaque mentions Basil's visit in 1018. In Greece, Basil is a more ambiguous figure. A harsh emperor, yes, but one who kept the empire safe, who maintained order, who held the line. A modern historian sits in a library, surrounded by ancient manuscripts and maps. Basil II is one of history's most effective rulers and one of its most morally troubling. He accomplished extraordinary things, reuniting the Balkans, reforming the army, securing borders that had been vulnerable for centuries. But the cost was immense, not just in the lives lost in battle, but in the deliberate brutality he employed. The blinding of 15,000 prisoners was not a military necessity. It was terror as policy. It was designed to break the spirit of an entire people. The historian pauses, considering. And it worked, which is perhaps the most disturbing part. Basil's cruelty achieved its goal. Bulgaria did not rebel again, not during his lifetime. The Balkans remained under Byzantine control for decades. So we're left with a question. Does effectiveness justify brutality? Can we admire the achievement while condemning the methods? History doesn't answer that question. It just presents us with the facts and asks us to struggle with them. Near the ruins of the parade grounds where Basil's soldiers once drilled, his tomb still stands. The inscription is worn but legible. From this place, I kept watch over the empire. It's not a boast. It's not even particularly eloquent. It's just a statement of fact. Basil II spent 50 years watching over an empire. He sacrificed everything: love, family, joy, perhaps even his soul, to keep it safe. And for a time, it worked. Sunrise over Constantinople, now Istanbul. The city is modern now, but the ancient walls still stand in places. The Hagia Sophia, converted to a mosque, then a museum, still dominates the skyline. Empires rise and fall. Emperors come and go. But some leave marks deeper than others. Basil II left his mark in blood and stone, in the fortresses he built, the roads he paved, the borders he defended, but also in the screams of the blinded, in the songs of mourning, in the collective trauma of a people who defied him and paid the price. Was he a hero, a villain, a necessary evil, a cautionary tale? Perhaps he was all of these things. Perhaps that's what makes him so fascinating and so troubling. The Balkans from above show mountains and valleys, cities and villages, the same landscape Basil and Samuel fought over 1,000 years ago. The mountains that witnessed Basil and Samuel's long war still stand. The passes where armies marched and bled are now crossed by tourists and trucks. The empires are gone. The emperors are dust. But the land remains, indifferent to the struggles of men. A final, lingering view of Basil's tomb as the sun sets, casting long shadows. History remembers Basil II as the Bulgar-Slayer. But perhaps a better title would be the last Roman, the final emperor who truly embodied the old virtues of discipline, duty, and ruthless pragmatism. He was not a good man. He may not even have been a great man in the moral sense. But he was an effective one, and in the brutal calculus of empire, sometimes that's all that matters. From his tomb, Basil II keeps watch no longer. The empire he died for crumbled centuries ago. But his shadow remains, a reminder of what humans are capable of, both magnificent and monstrous, when they pour themselves completely into a single purpose. Basil II, 958 to 1025, ruled. 976 to 1025, Byzantine Emperor, the Bulgar-Slayer. From this place, I kept watch over the empire,